The holographic displays flickered as delegates from across the galaxy took their seats in the vast amphitheater of the Galactic Council chambers, their voices creating a low hum of conversation in dozens of different languages. Ambassador Kale smoothed his purple-scaled hide as he reviewed the agenda for today's session. The territorial disputes in the Outer Rim had been growing more heated with each passing cycle, and resources were becoming scarce in the contested zones. "Order. Please bring this assembly to order," announced the towering figure of Speaker Voss, his crystalline voice cutting through the chatter like a blade through silk. "We shall begin with the matter of mining rights in the Outer Spiral territories." The first few hours dragged on with the usual political maneuvering and trade negotiations. Representatives from the Rylothian Empire arguing with the hegemony about asteroid belt claims, while the smaller species tried to secure their own piece of the galactic pie during a brief recess. The elderly Vorthon scholar named Osric shuffled to the central podium carrying an ancient data pad that looked older than some of the younger delegates present, his bent frame and weathered face showing the marks of countless years spent buried in archives. "Esteemed colleagues," Osric began, his voice crackling with age but still carrying the authority of someone who had spent a lifetime studying the past. "I have discovered something most curious in the restricted historical archives." Several delegates rolled their eyes or turned to side conversations, knowing that Osric was famous for bringing up obscure historical footnotes that had little bearing on current galactic politics. "The data fragments speak of a species called humans," Osric continued, ignoring the dismissive chuckles from the audience. "According to these records, they once held territory in what we now consider the empty void of the Forgotten Reach." Captain Nara of the Hegemony Fleet leaned forward in her seat, her forearms crossing as she spoke up. "Scholar Osric, with all due respect, the void sectors have been thoroughly scanned for centuries and contain nothing but empty space and cosmic dust." "But that is where you are mistaken, dear Captain," Osric replied with a knowing smile. "These humans apparently wielded primitive kinetic weapons, projectiles made of metal that they fired at incredible velocities. Yet somehow they managed to hold their own against plasma-based civilizations far more advanced than themselves." The laughter that erupted from the assembly was immediate and widespread, with delegates slapping their knees or whatever appendages served that purpose for their species. "You expect us to believe that metal bullets could stand against plasma cannons?" laughed Ambassador Kale, his scales shifting to a lighter shade that indicated amusement among his people. "What's next? Are you going to tell us they traveled in ships made of steel instead of energy-resistant polymers?" Osric nodded seriously, completely missing the sarcasm in Kale's voice. "Actually, yes, that is exactly what the records indicate. Their vessels were constructed of refined metals with no proper energy shielding whatsoever, yet they somehow survived encounters with our ancestors' most advanced warships." The ridicule continued as Osric described more details from the fragmentary records. Stories of humans who refused to surrender even when facing certain extinction, who would fight with damaged ships held together by nothing more than determination and crude repair patches. These beings supposedly had no telepathic abilities, no energy manipulation powers, no natural armor or enhanced physical capabilities, Osric explained as the crowd's attention began to wander. They were described as fragile creatures who could barely survive in their own native environment without artificial assistance. "Then how exactly did they pose any threat to anyone?" asked Delegate Quinn from the outer colonies, his tone making it clear he considered this entire discussion a waste of time. "That is the mystery," Osric admitted, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "The records suggest they possessed something our ancestors called human stubbornness or human ingenuity, though what these terms actually meant has been lost to time." Captain Nara stood up from her seat, her uniform crisp and her bearing military precise. "Scholar, I have spent decades patrolling the Outer Rim territories, and I can tell you that deep space miners sometimes report strange derelict ships with unusual markings, but these are clearly the products of space madness brought on by too much isolation and recycled air." The crowd murmured in agreement, most having heard similar stories from long-range explorers who claimed to have seen impossible things in the vast emptiness between star systems. "The human legends always follow the same pattern," Nara continued. "Mysterious ships that appear on sensors then vanish when investigated, strange transmissions in unknown languages, and tales of beings who fight like demons despite having no apparent advantages. Precisely the sort of stories that emerge when people spend too much time alone. In the void, agreed Ambassador Kale. The mind begins to create patterns where none exist, to populate the emptiness with imaginary threats and phantom enemies. Osric looked around the chamber with disappointment, clear on his weathered features. I understand your skepticism, but these records come from multiple independent sources across different time periods and species. Surely that suggests something more than mere fantasy. It suggests that our ancestors were better storytellers than we give them credit for, laughed Delegate Quinn. Creating a mythical enemy that could somehow threaten advanced civilizations despite being primitive and weak makes for entertaining propaganda. The session was called back to order as Speaker Voss returned to the podium, his crystalline form catching the light from the overhead displays. We shall now return to the matter of territorial disputes in the contested zones. Scholar Osric's historical presentation has been noted for the record. As the assembly settled back into their seats to continue the mundane business of galactic politics, Osric gathered his ancient datapad and shuffled back to his corner, muttering, under his breath, about closed minds and forgotten warnings. The debate over mining rights resumed with its usual passion and intensity. Delegates arguing over surveys and resource projections while completely dismissing the possibility that anything significant might exist in the supposedly empty regions of space. Hours later, as the session finally concluded and delegates began filing out to return to their various ships and stations, a low-ranking technician approached Speaker Voss with a concerned expression on her face. Sir, our long-range sensors have detected some unusual gravitational anomalies in the Forgotten Reach sector, she reported quietly. The readings don't match any known natural phenomena. Speaker Voss waved dismissively, his attention already focused on preparing for the next day's agenda. File it with the Science Council for investigation. Probably just another rogue planet or collapsed star system. Nothing that concerns this assembly. The technician nodded and hurried away, her report destined to join thousands of others in the bureaucratic maze of galactic administration, while, somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, something ancient began to stir. Trade vessels had been disappearing for 3 months now. Not destroyed or captured in the traditional sense, but simply vanishing from established shipping lanes without so much as a distress beacon or debris field to mark their passing fleet. Commander Thex paced the observation deck of his flagship Dominion, watching the stars wheel slowly past as his task force patrolled the affected region. The silence from the missing cargo haulers more unsettling than any battle cry could have. Binser, we have another report, announced his communications officer, a young Aldorian whose skin patches shifted from blue to worried purple. The mining transport Prosperity failed to make its scheduled check-in from the Kepler belt. Thex turned from the viewport with a frustrated growl, his species' natural predatory instincts making him want to hunt down whatever was threatening merchant vessels in his territory. That makes 17 ships in 12 weeks, all vanishing without explanation. The tactical display showed the locations where ships had last been detected, scattered across several light-years of space with no apparent pattern that fleet intelligence could discern. Each disappearance as mysterious as the last deploy reconnaissance drones to the Prosperity's last known coordinates, Thex ordered, though he held little hope they would find anything more than empty vacuum and increase patrol frequency in all affected sectors. Meanwhile, in the dusty archives of the Galactic Historical Institute, scholar Osric continued his research into the human legends driven by a growing certainty that the current crisis might be connected to the ancient records he had uncovered. The deeper he dug into the restricted databases, the more substantial evidence he found of humanity's former presence in the galaxy. Star charts that showed inhabited systems now considered barren, trade records mentioning human colonies that supposedly never existed. Computer, cross-reference human territorial claims with current shipping lane disruptions. He commanded the archive system, his aged fingers trembling slightly as he worked. The interface, the holographic display that materialized before him, showed an overlay that made his breath catch in his throat. The pattern of disappearances followed almost exactly the borders of what had once been human space, according to the ancient charts. Impossible. he whispered to himself, but the correlation was too strong to ignore. They didn't vanish. They retreated. Back in space, the investigation fleets were encountering their own mysteries. Scout ships reporting brief sensor contacts that defied explanation. Objects that appeared on long-range scanners only to vanish completely when approached for closer examination. Captain. Nara found herself commanding one of these search missions, her skepticism about space legends beginning to waver as her own sensors detected the impossible. Helm, take us to bearing 37 Mark II, something's out there. Sensors show empty space, Captain, her tactical officer reported. Confusion, evident in his voice. Whatever we detected has simply disappeared. The phenomenon repeated itself across dozens of patrol missions, fleeting glimpses of something that shouldn't exist in the void between stars, contacts that seemed almost deliberately elusive, as if playing an elaborate game of hide-and-seek with the galactic authorities. Deep space monitoring stations began recording strange energy signatures unlike anything in their databases, patterns that seemed artificial but followed no known technological principles, emissions that appeared to originate from the supposedly empty regions between star systems. These readings make no sense, complained Chief Scientist Dr. Wells at Observatory Station 7. The energy patterns suggest massive industrial activity, but our telescopes show nothing but cosmic background radiation. Her assistant, a nervous young researcher named Ben, pulled up additional data from neighboring monitoring posts. Ma'am, similar signatures are being detected across the entire outer rim, all coming from regions we've classified as uninhabited void. The mystery deepened when several mining operations in remote asteroid fields simply went silent, their automated distress beacons never activating, their regular status reports simply ceasing as if someone had thrown a switch. Commander Vale of the Outer Rim Security Force assembled a major investigation fleet, 12 heavy cruisers and their escort vessels representing the largest military deployment to the region in decades. Whatever's happening out there, we're going to get to the bottom of it. The fleet departed with great fanfare and considerable confidence, their mission broadcast across galactic news networks as a demonstration of the military's ability to protect civilian shipping from whatever new pirate faction or rogue artificial intelligence might be operating in the outer darkness. Scholar Osric watched the news coverage with growing dread, his research having uncovered references to human military doctrine that emphasized patience, observation, and striking only when victory was assured, tactics that seemed eerily similar to the current pattern of mysterious disappearances. Computer, display all references to human retreat protocols, he commanded, though part of him hoped he was wrong about the implications of what he was discovering. The data that appeared painted a picture of a species that had not been defeated in the ancient wars but had instead chosen withdrawal, falling back to prepared positions in the void while their enemies celebrated victory. Over an apparently vanquished foe, days passed without word from Commander Vale's investigation fleet, their regular status reports continuing on schedule until they reached the edge of what the ancient charts marked as human territory. Then silence fell like a curtain across the stars. "This is Galactic Command calling Task Force 7. The desperate voice of fleet operations crackled across subspace channels. "Commander Vale, please respond." Only cosmic static answered their calls, 12 of the galaxy's most advanced warships having seemingly evaporated into nothingness along with their crews of over 15,000 beings. The news of the fleet's disappearance sent shockwaves through galactic civilization, forcing even the most skeptical military leaders to acknowledge they were facing something far beyond ordinary pirates or technical malfunctions. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council were called as panic began to spread through the outer colonies, civilians demanding protection from whatever force could make entire fleets disappear without firing a shot. "We need answers," demanded Ambassador Kale, his scales now displaying the deep crimson of fear and anger. "Something is hunting our ships and our people, and we don't even know what we're fighting." Speaker Voss struggled to maintain order as delegates shouted over each other, their earlier dismissal of ancient legends now seeming foolishly naive in light of recent events. "We shall increase military patrols and demand explanations from any unknown contacts." In his archive chamber, Scholar Osric stared at the data displays. With growing certainty about what was happening, the patterns matching perfectly with human tactical doctrines that emphasized psychological warfare and strategic patience. "They've been watching us," he whispered to the empty room, the weight of realization settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. "All these centuries, they've been out there waiting and watching, while we forgot they ever existed." The galaxy's comfortable assumptions about human extinction were about to be shattered, but whether the revelation would bring salvation or destruction remained to be seen in the dark spaces between the stars, where legends had learned to become nightmares. Admiral Vor had never commanded such a massive fleet in his 40 years of military service. 200 warships from a dozen different species, all following his flagship, Centaurian Pride, into the unknown darkness of the Forgotten Reach. There, combined firepower enough to level entire star systems. The Armada moved in perfect formation through the void, sensors sweeping constantly for any sign of the force responsible for making 17 cargo ships and an entire investigation fleet simply vanish from existence without explanation or trace. "All vessels report ready status," announced his communications officer as they approached the coordinates where Commander Vale's task force had last been detected. "Fleet deployment complete, sir." Vor studied the tactical display with the eye of a veteran commander, watching. As his ship spread into a search pattern that would cover thousands of cubic kilometers of supposedly empty space, each vessel armed with the galaxy's most advanced weaponry and shielding. "Begin deep scan protocols," he ordered, though every military instinct he possessed warned him they were sailing into a trap. "I want to know about every grain of cosmic dust in this region." The hours that followed were filled with routine sensor sweeps and negative reports, the vast emptiness of space yielding no clues about the fate of the missing vessels or the identity of whatever force was operating in this forgotten corner of the galaxy. Then the lead scouts detected something that shouldn't have been possible: artificial structures of enormous scale hidden within a dense nebula that had somehow escaped detection by centuries of galactic surveys and exploration missions. "Admiral, you need to see this," called his science officer, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. "The nebula is artificial, sir. It's some kind of massive camouflage system." The main display showed what appeared to be a shipyard complex unlike anything in galactic civilization, construction facilities that dwarfed the largest military installations, their design following principles that seemed both familiar and completely alien. "Those are dry docks," whispered his tactical officer, in amazement. "But they're 10 times larger than anything we've ever built. What kind of ships would require facilities of that size?" Before Admiral Vor could respond, his sensors detected movement within the hidden complex, vessels beginning to emerge from concealed docking bays with a precision and coordination that spoke of long practice and careful planning. The ships that appeared were unlike anything in the galactic database, their hulls constructed of what appeared to be bare metal, without the energy-resistant polymers that made modern vessels possible, their weapon systems visible as crude projectile launchers rather than elegant plasma arrays. "Sir, the lead vessel is transmitting," reported the communications officer, his confusion evident as he tried to interpret the incoming signals, mathematical sequences and basic pictographs. "They're attempting first contact protocols." Admiral Vor felt his world shift. As the implications sank in, these weren't pirates or rogue artificial intelligences. They were representatives of an unknown civilization attempting diplomatic contact using standard galactic procedures. "Open a channel," he ordered, his voice steady despite the racing of his hearts. "Let's see what they have to say." The face that appeared on the main screen was startlingly familiar yet completely alien. A bipedal creature with smooth skin and curious eyes that seemed to hold depths of intelligence and determination that made Vor's military instincts sing warnings. "I am Captain Reed, of the vessel Defiance," the being said in perfectly accented galactic standard, his voice carrying the calm confidence of someone used to command. "I speak for humanity in extending greetings to your fleet." The bridge fell completely silent as the word humanity echoed through the assembled officers, the legends that had been dismissed as mythology suddenly standing before them in flesh and blood. "This is Admiral Vor of the Galactic Council Fleet," he managed to reply, his training taking over despite the shock of first contact with a species that wasn't supposed to exist. We are investigating the disappearance of several vessels in this region. Captain Reed's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes that suggested he knew exactly what disappearances the Admiral was referring to. Those vessels and their crews are safe, Admiral. They are being held under standard prisoner of war protocols, pending resolution of territorial disputes. Territorial disputes? Vor repeated, struggling to process the concept that these supposedly mythical beings were claiming ownership of what the galaxy considered empty space. This region has been uninhabited for centuries. According to your charts, perhaps, Reed replied with what might have been a slight smile. But humanity has maintained a continuous presence in these systems since our withdrawal from galactic affairs following the conclusion of the Void Wars. The tactical display updated as the human ships took position around Vor's fleet. Not in an aggressive formation, but clearly demonstrating their ability to surround and potentially overwhelm the larger force through superior positioning and local knowledge. We have been monitoring galactic civilization's development for over 300 standard years, Reed continued, his tone remaining diplomatic but firm, watching and waiting to see if your species had learned the lessons of the past. Admiral Vor found himself in a first contact situation that no military academy had prepared him for, facing beings who claimed to have been observing galactic civilization without being detected, who spoke of ancient wars as recent history. Our historical records make no mention of humanity surviving the Void Wars, he said carefully, aware that every word was being recorded and would be analyzed by xenobiologists and historians for centuries to come. Your historical records were written by the victors, Reed replied, and now there was definitely steel in his voice. Who found it convenient to declare us extinct rather than admit we had simply chosen to leave. The human ships maintained their positions around the galactic fleet, their crude appearance masking what was clearly sophisticated tactical coordination and space handling capabilities that suggested centuries of continued development in isolation. We have established monitoring posts throughout what you call the Outer Rim, Reed explained as data packets began arriving at Admiral Vor's ship. We have watched your expansion into territories we consider our protectorates, systems containing primitive species under our guidance. The information flooding Vor's computers painted a picture of human presence throughout regions the galaxy considered thoroughly explored. Hidden bases and outposts that had somehow remained undetected despite regular patrols and survey missions. Why reveal yourselves now? Vor asked, his mind racing through the implications of what he was learning. Why end centuries of secrecy? Reed's expression grew more serious as he glanced at something off-screen. Because our deep space sensors have detected the return of an old enemy, one that your current military capabilities are not equipped to handle. The mention of an unknown threat sent chills through Admiral Vor's command crew. The idea that humanity had remained hidden not out of fear, but as guardians against something worse, changing the entire context of first contact. We are prepared to discuss terms for mutual cooperation, Reed continued, but such negotiations will require representatives from your Galactic Council with authority to make binding agreements. Admiral Vor realized he was faced with a decision that would reshape galactic civilization, whether to treat these humans as enemies to be destroyed or potential allies against whatever threat had them concerned. I will relay your offer to the Council, he said finally. Where do you propose such negotiations take place? Reed smiled for the first time, an expression that was both reassuring and slightly predatory. We suggest the neutral station of Haven Point, Admiral, a facility we have been using for diplomatic contacts when the need arose. The revelation that humanity had been conducting diplomacy with unknown parties while remaining hidden from the galaxy's major powers added another layer of complexity to an already unprecedented situation. As the human ships began withdrawing back into their hidden complex, Admiral Vor found himself staring at a completely changed universe. One where humanity had never truly left, but had been watching and waiting for the right moment to emerge from the shadows of legend into the harsh light of reality. Haven Point Station had never hosted such a tense gathering of galactic powers. the ancient diplomatic facility floating in neutral space while representatives from dozens of species argued over humanity's sudden emergence from 3 centuries of supposed extinction. Admiral Cross of the human delegation sat quietly at the negotiating table, his weathered face showing the patience of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment, while across from him Ambassador Kale's scales shifted through agitated color patterns. You cannot simply claim vast territories that have been considered empty space for generations, Kale argued, his voice rising with each word. The Galactic Accords clearly state that uninhabited systems are open to colonization by member species. Cross leaned forward slightly, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the emotional outbursts coming from the galactic representatives. Those systems were never uninhabited, Ambassador. They were protected reserves containing developing civilizations under human guidance. The revelation that humanity had been secretly shepherding primitive species while the galaxy believed them extinct sent waves of shock through the assembled delegates, their comfortable assumptions about territorial rights crumbling under the weight of new information. Show us proof of these supposed protectorates, demanded Captain Nara, her military bearing unable to hide her frustration at discovering her patrol routes had been monitored for decades. If you've been watching us, where is the evidence? Cross activated a holographic display that filled the center of the conference room, showing detailed records of galactic fleet movements, trade routes, and expansion patterns dating back over 2 centuries of supposedly secret operations. We know about your mining surveys in the Kepler system, your military exercises near the Vega colonies, and your plans to establish forward bases in the Centauri Reach, he said quietly. We have been watching everything. The delegates fell silent as they processed the implications of total surveillance by a species they had dismissed as mythological, their military secrets and expansion plans apparently an open book to human intelligence. What happened to our missing ships? Asked Speaker Voss, his crystalline voice carrying undertones of worry. Commander Vale's fleet and the disappeared cargo vessels. Safe and unharmed, Cross replied without hesitation. Their crews are being held at comfortable facilities pending the outcome of these negotiations, standard treatment under human military law for territorial violations. The admission that humanity had captured intact military vessels without firing a shot demonstrated capabilities that made every galactic officer present recalculate their assessment of human technological development. We demand their immediate release, insisted Admiral Vor, his species' pride stinging at the revelation that his ships had been easily captured by supposedly primitive opponents. Cross shook his head slowly. That will depend on the agreements we reach here, Admiral. Humanity has learned to be cautious about releasing assets before securing proper diplomatic guarantees. The negotiations might have continued in this deadlock for days, but the crisis that changed everything began with urgent transmissions from the Outer Rim colonies. Reports of attacks by unknown forces using technology unlike anything in galactic databases. Priority message from Kepler Station, announced the communication officer, his face pale with shock. They report multiple contacts of unknown configuration launching unprovoked attacks on civilian populations. The holographic displays around the conference room shifted to show tactical readouts from the embattled colony, revealing attackers that appeared to be mechanical constructs of enormous size, their weapon systems tearing through defensive positions with terrifying efficiency. The Devourers have returned, Cross said quietly, and every human in the room suddenly looked decades older. We had hoped they would remain dormant for another century. Ambassador Kale turned to stare at the human admiral. You know what these things are? You've encountered them before? They are the reason humanity withdrew from galactic affairs, Cross explained, his voice heavy with old memories. Ancient machines left behind by a civilization that consumed itself, programmed to destroy any sufficiently advanced technological presence they detect. The tactical feeds from Kepler Station showed galactic defense forces engaging the mechanical invaders with their most advanced plasma weapons, only to watch helplessly as the attackers adapted to each energy frequency within minutes of exposure. Our weapons are having no effect, reported the colony's defense commander. These things are learning faster than we can modify our attack patterns. More reports began flooding in from other Outer Rim settlements, a wave of mechanical death spreading through previously secure territories as the Devourers emerged from whatever deep space hibernation had concealed them for centuries. "The Galactic Fleet must respond immediately," declared Admiral Vor, rising from his seat. "We cannot allow these attackers to continue their rampage unopposed." Cross remained seated, his expression grim. "Your energy-based weapons will prove ineffective, Admiral. The Devourers were designed to adapt to plasma and particle beam technology. They will only grow stronger with each engagement." The revelation that humanity possessed knowledge of the enemy's capabilities while the galaxy's primary weapons were useless sent a chill through every military representative at the conference table. "Then what do you suggest?" asked Captain Nara, her professional instincts overriding political considerations. "How do we fight something that adapts to our technology?" For the first time since the negotiations began, Cross smiled, and the expression was neither pleasant nor reassuring. "Kinetic weapons, Captain. The same primitive projectile systems your people have been mocking for the past several days." The irony was not lost on the galactic delegates that their dismissal of human military capabilities might have doomed their own defensive efforts. Against an enemy that had been specifically designed to counter their advanced energy weapons, metal bullets against adaptive armor, scoffed Ambassador Kale, though his earlier confidence was noticeably absent. How can primitive kinetics succeed where plasma fails? Because the Devourers were built by a civilization that considered physical projectiles obsolete, Cross explained patiently. Their adaptive systems were never programmed to counter kinetic penetrators. The concept was so archaic, their creators never imagined encountering it. Emergency reports continued streaming in from the battle zones, showing galactic forces falling back in disarray as their weapons proved worse than useless against enemies that grew stronger with each failed attack. "We offer our assistance," Cross said formally. Though his tone suggested the offer came with conditions, human forces are equipped and trained to combat Devourer technology. The Galactic Council faced a choice that would define the future of their civilization: accept help from the species they had dismissed as legends or watch their worlds fall to an enemy they could not defeat with their own advanced technology. "What are your terms?" asked Speaker Voss, the question carrying the weight of acknowledging humanity's return to galactic affairs on their own terms, rather than as supplicants. Cross stood and activated another display showing the true extent of human military presence. In the galaxy's dark corners, recognition of our territorial claims, full membership in an expanded galactic council, and joint command authority for the duration of the crisis. As another colony fell silent under Devourer assault, the assembled delegates realized they were witnessing the end of one galactic age and the beginning of another, where humanity would emerge from legend to take their place as a major power whether the galaxy welcomed them or not. The first human ships to arrive at the Battle of Kepler Station were nothing like what the galactic forces expected. Sleek vessels with exposed metal hulls and weapon systems that looked more like industrial equipment than military hardware, Commander. Steele watched the tactical display from the bridge of his destroyer hammer as Devourer machines tore through another galactic defense line, their adaptive armor shrugging off plasma fire while their own weapons carved through energy shields like paper. "All ships, this is Steele. Implement attack pattern Omega," he transmitted on the human command frequency. "Remember, these things adapt to energy weapons, but they've never seen a good old-fashioned railgun." The human vessels opened fire with weapons that hadn't been seen in galactic warfare for centuries, magnetically accelerated projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed, each shot carrying kinetic energy that no adaptive armor could simply absorb or redirect. The effect was immediate and devastating. Devourer constructs that had seemed invulnerable to the galaxy's most advanced weapons, staggering under impacts that punched clean through their hulls, their adaptive systems completely unprepared for purely physical attacks. "Direct hits across the enemy formation," reported his weapons officer with satisfaction. "Their armor is providing no protection against kinetic penetrators." But the relief of the galactic forces was premature, because Steele's small flotilla represented only a tiny fraction of humanity's true military capability, and the Devourer response was escalating beyond anything the current forces could handle. "Admiral Cross, we have a problem," Steele transmitted back to Haven Point, where negotiations had been suspended in favor of crisis management. Long-range sensors showed Devourer reinforcements emerging from deep space hibernation, thousands of them. The scale of the threat became clear as monitoring stations across the galaxy detected massive signatures converging on populated systems, an armada of mechanical death that had been sleeping in the void for centuries, awakened by the detection of advanced civilization. The HFY preliminary force was just a scouting probe, Cross explained to the assembled galactic representatives, his voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. The main Devourer fleet is designed to sterilize entire galactic arms of technological life. Ambassador Kale stared at the tactical projections with growing horror. How many ships are we talking about, Admiral? What kind of numbers? Cross was quiet for a long moment before answering. Conservative estimates suggest approximately 50,000 combat units of various sizes, some larger than your biggest space stations. The silence that followed this revelation was broken only by the soft humming of the station's life support systems, as the representatives tried to process the magnitude of the threat bearing down on galactic civilization. Your combined fleets number in the thousands, Cross continued relentlessly. Even with human assistance, the current force levels are insufficient to meet this threat. Captain Nara found her voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Then we're all dead, there's no way. To evacuate entire star systems before they arrive. Not necessarily, Cross replied, and for the first time since the crisis began, there was something approaching hope in his expression. The ships you've encountered so far represent only humanity's forward reconnaissance force. The human admiral activated a communication channel that reached far beyond Haven Point, sending coded transmissions to coordinates in the deepest void between galactic arms, regions that every survey had declared completely empty. Command Authority Steele to Void Fleet, he spoke into the transmitter. Authorization Lazarus 77, request immediate deployment to Galactic Defense Perimeter Alpha. The response came, not in words but in the form of massive gravitational anomalies detected by every sensor array in the galaxy, space itself seeming to twist as something enormous emerged from hyperspace at the edge of galactic civilization. "What have you done?" whispered Speaker Voss as his sensors struggled to process the incoming data. "Those signatures are impossible." Admiral Cross smiled, and this time the expression was one of fierce satisfaction. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I present the human Void Fleet, constructed over 3 centuries of isolation and preparation for exactly this scenario." The tactical displays throughout Haven Point updated to show the approaching human armada, and the numbers made every galactic officer present question their understanding of military logistics and shipbuilding capabilities. 2,743 vessels of the line, Cross announced as if reading a shopping list, including 12 Dreadnought-class command ships and the flagship Terra Nova, displacement approximately 4 times your largest battleships. The human fleet that emerged from the void was a testament to centuries of focused military development, ships built not for exploration or trade, but for the single purpose of fighting an enemy that could adapt to any energy-based weapon system. "How is this possible?" demanded Admiral Vor, his tactical mind struggling to comprehend the resources required for such a construction project. The industrial capacity alone would require entire systems dedicated to nothing but ship production, which is exactly what we built, Cross replied matter-of-factly. 17 hidden shipyard complexes in the space between galactic arms, powered by captured stellar mass and staffed by multiple generations of engineers who knew their work might determine humanity's survival. The scale of human preparation became clear as the Void Fleet took position throughout the galaxy, their arrival coordinated with a precision that spoke of decades of planning and rehearsal. Every human child born in the past 3 centuries has been raised knowing this day would come. Cross explained to the stunned galactic representatives, "We have prepared for nothing else, built for nothing else, trained for nothing else." The first major engagement between the human Void Fleet and the Devourer Armada took place in the outer system of Centauri Prime, where Admiral Cross himself took command of the battle from his flagship, Terra Nova. "All vessels, this is Cross. Weapons free on my command." His voice carried across hundreds of ships as they formed attack formations that had been practiced in secret for generations. "Remember, every shot counts, every ship matters, and failure is not an option." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human ships moving in coordinated wolf packs that surrounded and overwhelmed individual devourer constructs before they could adapt to the kinetic weapons tearing them apart. Commander Steele found himself leading a desperate assault on a devourer command vessel the size of a small moon, his destroyer Hammer and its escorts threading between defensive positions that could have destroyed them with a single hit. "Target the central processing core," he ordered as railgun rounds hammered against the massive construct's hull. "If we can take out their coordination node, the smaller units will lose tactical cohesion." The human fleet demonstrated tactics that had been refined through centuries of preparation, using speed and maneuverability to avoid the Devourer's devastating energy weapons while concentrating overwhelming kinetic firepower on critical targets. But the enemy was learning, even as they fought, Devourer units beginning to coordinate their defensive patterns to minimize the effectiveness of human pack tactics, their ancient programming adapting to counter-strategies they had never encountered before. "Sir, enemy formation is shifting to protect their command units," reported Steele's tactical officer as the battle intensified around them. "They're using their smaller constructs as shields." The solution came from an unexpected source as galactic fleet units began integrating with human formations, their energy, weapons providing distraction and support. While the kinetic specialists delivered killing blows, Captain Nara found herself fighting alongside the same human ships she had dismissed as primitive weeks earlier, her cruiser's plasma arrays drawing Devourer attention while human destroyers closed for point-blank railgun strikes. "This is actually working," she transmitted to Admiral Cross as another mechanical giant collapsed under concentrated fire. "Your people fight like they've been preparing for this their entire lives." "Because we have," Cross replied simply as his flagship engaged a cluster of Devourer-heavy units. Every human born in the void knew their purpose was to stand between the galaxy and extinction. The tide of battle turned when human engineers demonstrated another capability the galaxy had underestimated: field modifications to galactic energy weapons that made them less predictable to Devourer adaptive systems. "Randomize your plasma frequencies every 3 seconds. Steele instructed the galactic forces over an open channel. "Don't give their adaptation protocols time to analyze your energy signatures." The combined fleet pressed their advantage as Devourer units began falling faster than they could be replaced, their ancient programming finally meeting an enemy that fought with tactics and weapons their creators had never anticipated. But victory came at a terrible cost. Human ships throwing themselves into hopeless positions to protect galactic vessels, their crews accepting certain death to ensure the survival of species they had been guarding from the shadows for centuries. The final assault on the Devourer primary command construct required everything both fleets could muster: a coordinated strike that would either end the mechanical invasion or doom galactic civilization to extinction. Commander Steele led the final charge in his battered destroyer, its hull scarred by countless impacts but its railguns still firing with mechanical precision as he drove toward the heart of enemy resistance. "All ships concentrate fire on the primary core," Cross ordered as the Terra Nova unleashed every weapon in its arsenal. "This is our moment. Make it count." The explosion that followed lit up half the system as centuries of accumulated Devourer technology was reduced to expanding plasma and debris, the death scream of ancient machines finally silenced after eons of mechanical hibernation. In the aftermath of victory, as rescue ships searched for survivors and damage assessment teams cataloged the cost of salvation, Admiral Cross stood before the reformed Galactic Council with humanity's terms for the future. "The Terra Accords will establish humanity as a full member of galactic civilization," he announced to representatives who no longer questioned human capabilities. "We will maintain our territorial claims and our protectorate responsibilities." Ambassador Kale, his scales now showing the deep blue of respect and gratitude, rose to address the assembly. Humanity has earned the right to stand as equals among galactic powers. Their sacrifice and preparation have saved us all. The signing ceremony took place aboard the Terra Nova, with representatives from every galactic species acknowledging humanity's emergence from legend into the harsh reality of interstellar politics. The galaxy will never be the same, Speaker Voss observed as he watched human and alien crews working together to repair battle damage. We thought we knew the shape of civilization, but humanity has shown us how much we had forgotten. Captain Nara, her own ship saved by human intervention during the final battle, spoke for many when she addressed the human crews. You could have remained hidden, could have let us face extinction while you waited in safety, but you chose to stand and fight beside us. Admiral Cross accepted the galactic recognition with the same quiet dignity he had shown throughout the crisis. Humanity never forgot that we are all children of the same stars, whether we acknowledge each other or not. The new age of galactic civilization began with the establishment of joint defense protocols and integrated fleet commands, ensuring that never again would any species face extinction alone, while others remained unaware of the threat. And in the deepest archives of the Galactic Historical Institute, scholar Osric carefully updated the records to reflect the truth about humanity's place in galactic affairs, ensuring that future generations would remember both the legends and the reality of the species that had risen from the void to stand guard over the stars.